Hello and welcome back to Hearts Wide Open, the men's health podcast. This is your host, Dennis. Thanks for tuning in to redefine what it means to be a man together with us. Today, I'll be talking to our wonderful guest, Paul Doughty. He is a published author, a public speaker, and he soon has a TV series coming out about his life story. He has a resilience movement going on as well. His book is actually called Resilience, the Ultimate Superpower. He's also going to talk about that with us. And before we jump into today's episode, just a reminder on how you can support the podcast. If you're a fan of the show, please remember to follow us on our socials, like this episode, share it with your friends, and help us raise the voice around men's health. Welcome, Paul.
Dennis, hello. Thanks for having me. I much appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
You're based in the US. We just talked about that near Boston.
That's correct. I live in a small town, Scituate, it's called, about 20 miles south of Boston. It's a coastal community, so it's a nice area.
Cool. Yeah, I'm also by the coast actually, right now in the near the Baltic Sea, where I'm originally from.
Very nice.
Something we have in common.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Paul, we got in touch through email. You actually messaged us because you liked what we do and wanted to see if there is space on this podcast to share your story. Yeah, wondering what made you think that Hearts Wide Open is the right place for you to talk about your story.
Yeah, I think it's quite simple because of men having mental health challenges. Because I had many mental health challenges, because as we know, when you have depression one time, it comes back the second time a little bit easier. So, yeah, I've overcome a couple different bouts or two or three different bouts of depression.
There's something really, really valuable that you just said there. And this is probably something that many men out there can relate to. The first time you struggle or the first time you really experience something new like this that makes you feel uncomfortable is the hardest one to overcome. And I think as more and more struggles come towards you in life, which will happen eventually, you develop tools each time to cope and to grow with these challenges, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And you said a word that is quite interesting, and I use it often. It's the uncomfortable. Because what it was, taking that first uncomfortable step to seek help and to seek therapy, because I was in a state where if I wouldn't have, I wouldn't be talking with you today. So I was at a point where, at least the first time going through a depression state, I was at a point where I had to do something.
Hmm. So maybe take us a little bit back to, because you mentioned depression a couple of times now. Like, what's the story and what made you like? What was the first struggle you really experienced in life that you realized I need to do something about this or I need to work on something?
Yeah, well, I experienced childhood domestic violence from the age of 4 to 12. And there was an incident when I was 4 or 5 years old that impacted me my whole life. I saw a very traumatic incident where my father hit my mother over the head with a glass bottle, and I thought she was dead. And that one incident, it impacted me my whole life, and it took half my life to figure it out. When that occurred, I froze. Flight, freeze, or fight? I froze.
Flight, freeze. You froze.
Yeah, exactly. I froze and I was in a state of going through the motions on autopilot for almost 30 years. And I was functioning, had a job. I ended up getting married with 2 kids, and I was, functioning through life, because what I was doing is I kind of froze and I was just going through the motion as whatever was next. As an example, in high school, I liked physics, so I majored in physics. My sister went to a college that was for teachers, and so I went to the same school. No thought, no what should I be doing, because I was just doing whatever's next. So, and after my parents divorced when I was 12, my mother and father weren't around. They weren't around. We lived on our own. We had a roof over our heads, but that was about it. And in those years of being alone from 12 to 18 really planted my seeds of resilience, because I had to figure out how I would survive, how I would eat, and so forth. So, and during those years of 12 through 18 is when I was dark into drugs and alcohol, when I started into drugs and alcohol, because I was just trying to hide the pain and the emotions that I was feeling. And so I hid behind that veil, I call it, or fog, for 30 years before I took action. And like I said, I was functioning through life. I wasn't doing the right things. I was playing rugby at the time. I played rugby for 12 years. So I got married. I had 2 kids. I was playing rugby. I'm doing the wrong things. And there was a point that I kind of said I need to do something. And as we said, I took that uncomfortable step.
And when you say you were functioning, what do you mean by that?
That I was a normal functioning in society.
Hmm.
I wasn't, again, doing the right things. I was drinking and driving. I was doing, drugs. I was staying out late at night. I was playing rugby, like I said, which took 3, 4 days a week. We would travel on the weekends, and so that took me away from my family. I did all the wrong things, but I was functioning. I had a job. I was in IT. I was in IT for 30 years, and I was just going through the motions.
Hmm.
I was not being my best self, right? I wasn't succeeding as much as I could have or should have, but I was functioning.
Yeah, I hear a lot of things there that make me really interested in going even deeper. I've heard this before from another man who I met at a retreat. On paper, he was having a good life. Like he had a family, he had kids, he had a job and all that. But he was sharing that he felt really numb and like life is not special. It's just going on. And I was wondering if that's something that you can relate with in that phase of your life.
Yes, yeah, I was in a low energy state. I was living in fear, in shame, and
Hmm.
and when you're living in that low level energy state, you're hanging around with low energy people. You're doing things that support that lifestyle. So yeah, what had ended up happening is I ended up going to therapy. I ended up going to therapy. A friend of my mother's, who was a therapist, I ended up going to see. I finally said that I can't do this anymore. I knew that I was on a path of self destruction. So I started therapy. And when I started therapy, it was apparent that I didn't remember anything. So the therapist contacted my mother and said, "You better write Paul a letter, give him some information." So my mother wrote me a letter that gave me some context of what happened and when things happened. And in addition, she had given me a book called 101 Ways to Transform Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. That is a book of a compilation of many of his writings. When I started reading this book, it was it was a cassette tape at the time. So I was listening to this book, I was getting therapy, getting some information, and then that fog started to dissipate a little bit and things started to happen for me.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I took that uncomfortable step before I started to see that fog dissipate.
It sounds like you went through this really rough childhood, and then in order to be a functioning adult in society, you pushed those things so far away from you that you forgot them, right? Like that they were
Yes,
just not present anymore.
that is actually true. Because I went through an awakening. I woke up, and
Hmm.
it was a spiritual awakening, and it was some divine intervention that ended with me quit drinking. And it's been 26 years since I've had that drink. And all of those things that happened to me, which were spiritual and in nature, as I mentioned, some divine intervention that I know, that wouldn't all occurred if I wouldn't have taken that one first uncomfortable step. And, nobody wants to take that step. Nobody wants to go to therapy and say, I have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to admit they have a problem, right? Especially in this day and age where we're supposed to be so self-sufficient and everything. And I think that's the biggest thing that holds people back from seeking help, how they feel they'll be justified by their peers, that they will be looked at as somebody that has a problem. And, I say to that we all have problems, some bigger than others, but we all have problems. Every family has some type of dysfunction. So
100%. I think these problems, like you call them problems now, but I think it's a lot of times it's trauma. And trauma, like it happens to everybody. Trauma is the response of your body to something that happens in your life. So sometimes things happen and you don't react at all. Your body doesn't have a reaction. That's fine. But some things happen and your body reacts, and the intensity of this reaction differs from human to human. So really there's also like on this scale, there's no big or small problem. Everyone has a problem. Everyone has a trauma. You cannot go through life without any life experiences that impact you. And
yeah,
so that's why, I also believe you mentioned therapy. Now I think therapy is so misunderstood. I try to push this message that therapy is more like a doctor's visit, like a checkup. You don't even have to have a major problem. You don't have to have the problem to impact you so hard that you think, okay, I need to go to therapy. You can already go earlier. Like in your case, you didn't have to wait 30 years to go to therapy, right?
that's for sure.
But you had to wait 30 years in order for something in order to realize I actually need to go somewhere. And then
That's right.
there's so many things that I would like to touch upon right now. Like also it sounds like you were lucky that someone in your environment was actually a therapist that you could go to, because for a lot of people that's also not that easy to go to a stranger and ask for help,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, especially back then. There were many times I was lucky because things were kind of put across my desk. Oh, I did want to touch on something though. We talked about the struggles, and there's always something underlying. When, like I was acting out in drugs and alcohol, there's always an underlying problem, and we don't know what was really affecting us. Sometimes struggles can hide in many different areas, and we don't know a lot of what is impacting us. We finally figure it out sometimes. There's something underlying here that I need some help with, but a lot of times it doesn't come right out. I mean, we have to, as you say, go into therapy and just talk, because that's what it is. It's just like this is a conversation. It's a conversation with a therapist. You develop relationships with these therapists, and they understand you and they help you navigate some things.
I sometimes call it a friend who also has knowledge and tools of psychology, and they talk to a lot of other friends who also have this type of experiences. So like it's
Yes.
really like you have access to such a big toolbox of things just by talking to someone who's doing this work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Uh, back to this big struggle that actually got you to go see a therapist back then. What was it in the end that made you think, okay, I want to talk to someone? Like what happened there?
Before I started to be a therapist, I kind of like said to myself, I don't like where I am. I didn't like. I had wife and two kids. I was had a good job, but I was like, I got to do something. I don't like this. I don't like where I am. And with my mother never being around, I ended up marrying my mother. My first wife was my mother. She kind of took that place because she was very nurturing and very loving and hovering and so forth. And
Do,
I
do you
needed that.
do you mean by I married my mother? Do you mean someone who was like your mother, or someone who was like the mother that you never had in a way?
Someone who took the role of my mother,
Okay,
if
the
that makes
role that
sense.
your mother should have had in your life, or
That's right. That's right. And because she was kind of that motherly figure, if you will, and she kind of took that role. And not until therapy did I understand that. And So I don't, again, to your original question, I don't know if there was any one particular thing. I think it was a combination of just being really lost for a period of time to say, I can't continue this. I think something said to myself, I can't continue as I am, because I would have been dead. I know that.
Ah. Hmm. This,
You don't know
yeah.
which way to go.
No, I feel this huge overwhelm because you've been through a lot, and I'm so happy to talk to you right now. And when you said that
It's
you wouldn't
nice.
be here if you wouldn't have done
Yeah.
that, like I felt
Yeah.
like, yeah, so like, it goes to show that it really pays off to take this step, you know?
It does. Yeah, it does. Sometimes because there was divine intervention, as I said, when I quit drinking, I just quit. It was my birthday. It was September 12th, 1998. I said, I'm done. I quit.
Hmm.
And I just kind of snapped my fingers. And I say that I'm a little guilty at times being able to do that because there's so many people who struggle with addiction and trying to quit and so forth. But you have to have faith, and that's what it came down to for me. Is I had faith and I turned to that, and that's what ended up getting me over that hump. Yeah, the final hump.
That's beautiful. I
Well, it's
think,
not the final hump, but don't get me wrong. There are more struggles in my life, but in that hump, I say the final hump because I quit drinking. Because
yeah.
that's, again, if I wouldn't have quit drinking, it's easy that I wouldn't be here.
Hmm.
It's not like I drank all the time. I was a fun drink. I
Hmm.
just didn't have any moderation. There was no moderation in my vocabulary. I would just continue to go, and that was the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think substances in general, alcohol, drugs, whatever it be, smoking, I think it like we use those things to distract ourselves from what's actually going on and push it down again and let me be the fun guy. Some people also just do it in order to have peace of mind and sleep. That's a coping
Yeah,
mechanism that's very common.
absolutely. What we're doing is just hiding the pain. We're just
Hmm.
hiding the pain that's underneath, that's underlying. Yeah, most of the times that when someone has a drug or alcohol problem, there's usually if it's not social, right? If it's not a social drink that you go out and have a couple drinks, or one time you go to the bar with your friends and someone else is driving and you have a few. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's when you go over the top, and when you do that, usually there's something underneath that is the problem.
Yeah. Hmm. And so to continue in the story, maybe, so like you went to therapy and then now years after again, you went to therapy again, actually, in between. I'm wondering, what are you doing now to live your best life? Because you seem like a very reflected, positive, happy guy. What is the key to stay that way for you?
And it could be very simple. I can't control other people's actions, only my reactions. So if somebody wants to act like an idiot, call me an idiot, or is an idiot, I don't care. It doesn't bother me, right? I control my actions and my reaction. That's what I'm responsible for. And if I let somebody else dictate how I feel, if they make me feel sad, angry, or even happy, that's like being in prison, isn't it?
Hmm.
So you're in control of your actions and your reactions. So I don't let other things bother me. I mean, it really comes down to that. It really does. But there's faith and behind that and so forth. I'm spiritual, I pray and so forth. But it really comes down to that. Don't let shit bother you, is what I say. So what?
Mm.
It really does. Yeah, but there were more struggles. I ended up getting remarried. I was married for 23 years. For half that marriage, it was okay. The second half was my wife became emotionally abusive. She cheated on me for 12 years. I was going through Lyme disease at this time. Lyme disease is a tick-borne illness that usually comes from a deer or something, and it affects you cognitively. It affects your joints and your muscles. I lost 50% of my hearing. So I was going through this Lyme disease, which Lyme disease makes you very isolate, makes you feel isolated, makes you feel. So I had Lyme disease for 4 years before I knew it. And the longer you have it, the harder it is to get rid of. So
Mhm.
I was on antibiotics for 4 or 5 years, like 3 antibiotics at one time for 3 or 4 years. So that 8, 9 year time of going through that Lyme disease left me depressed. Found out my wife was having an affair. I was trying to provide, trying to divorce her. She wouldn't leave. For 4 years I slept on the couch. She wouldn't leave. So I was in a pretty bad state, needless to say. Lyme disease, wife, the relationship. I lived on the couch. I slept on the couch for 4 years. We didn't talk to each other for 4 years in this 1,400 square foot home. So I was at the end. I was suicidal, quite honestly. And came across my desk. My sister, her son went to school with a woman in his mother owned a place in Florida, in Orlando, called the Healing House, and they offered TMS therapy. It's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And what it's like is it's like you sit in this dentist chair and they put this thing on your head. And they're looking for different spots in your head. They're mapping your head. Like this area here is for depression, and there's different areas for different things. And so they map your head. They put your hand like this, and this thing is like a magnetic, and it feels like a woodpecker. So it feels like that, and it'll hit you like every 5 seconds, 100 times here, back here. It's a different variation, and so forth. But they find the spot in your hand goes like this involuntarily when they're looking for these spots. So they find the spots, and then you go through this TMS therapy for 30 days. And it's like 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there. So it takes about an hour, 45 minutes. For 30 days, I did that. I walked into this place crying. I forgot a piece of paper, and I was like, I forgot my paper. I was crying. That's how depressed I was. In the state I was suicidal. And I came out of that a new man. I came out of it a new man. I was back to myself. And when I was going through that, just as an FYI, the first thing what kind of happens to you, it opens up your mind. Because what ended up first happening is like words that I didn't use for a while started to come out. Phrases that I never haven't used started to come out. And, my mind would be quicker. I would like, that was quick. I responded pretty quick to that. So it opened up my mind again, and absolutely 100% saved me. And just one last thing about it is the TMS therapy, at least in the States, is not offered unless you are going through therapy, you're on medication, and things aren't working.
Mhm.
So it's it's not approved by the insurance companies here in the States unless it's justified. So, yeah, that is, I wanted to mention that because it may benefit some of your listeners. I don't know if it's offered in other countries, but it's something worth looking into if you're having a hard time getting over the depression.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm hearing about TMS for the first time, as far as I remember. Really cool to hear the story. I can imagine how it looks like with the magnetic thingies on your head.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like a little bowl. And yeah, it pecks on your head like, yeah, it's crazy. It worked. It worked for me. I don't know if it works for everyone, but it works for me.
yeah. Yeah, what I thought was maybe that the human brain every second, like there's 1,000, maybe a million, I don't know how many, but a lot of thoughts going on at the same time and images coming, and we always pick just one to look at. And like it could be that you get stuck always looking at the same images or the same thoughts, and then others maybe go to the background. And like I have no idea about TMS, but I could imagine that this helped get those other things out of you that maybe you haven't looked at in a while, that were already there.
Yeah, well, when I kind of woke up, I changed my thoughts because your thoughts change or create your reality. If you're always thinking of negative things and that's where your mind is, that's what you're going to attract. That's what you're going to get. I use this simple example. I was playing a game with my son, a dice game, and we were throwing dice, and he was like, don't give me a six, don't give me a six. I was like, no, 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 give me a three, give me a five, give me a seven, right? Don't wish for those bad things. Don't think of the bad things. Think of the good things, not the bad.
Yeah. Yeah, also like this is really cool. Actually, like this example with the dice, because if you stop attaching value to not getting the six or getting the six, then and you're just happy you're playing the game, let's say, then any number becomes okay and you can be fine, you know? Like at the end, all these games are also not like if you win or lose. For me, it doesn't matter. I think in the end, for me, like the engagement or the that I'm playing with someone, that I'm there,
Yeah.
that's already enough, you know?
Yeah, I wish I was like that, Dennis. I was so competitive when I was young. I wanted to win tiddlywinks, if anyone knows what that is. But yeah, I used to want to win everything, so I
Yeah.
wish I could have been like that.
I mean, I've also not always thought about it like this, but yeah, definitely like that's somehow where I'm at right now. Yeah, but thanks for sharing about TMS. So I was wondering, maybe you can, because like maybe the people who are viewing this on YouTube or they have the video turned on, they can see in the background you have this Superman logo with an R in it, and it says "Resilience is my superpower." And that's also the name of your book, which should be out by the time this episode launches. Go ahead and check that out if you're listening. Yeah, check it out. Why resilience, and what does this mean to you? Resilience is my superpower. I could hear like resilience is probably all over your life story, but why did you choose resilience?
Yeah, because what I believe when someone is struggling, and someone isn't struggling, what you need to do is speak up. Is one thing. I never spoke up. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. My grandmother was my anchor. I spent a lot of time with her, my father's mother, but I never told her what was going on. I never told anybody. So ask for help. Whatever you're struggling with, ask for help. Of the young teenagers that are struggling, only 35% of them ask for help. So that means 65% of young adults that are struggling with whatever they may be aren't asking for help. So we need to get better at that. And I also talk about getting involved. If you're struggling, if I was involved in sports, I played football. If I wouldn't have been involved in sports, I would have self-isolated because that's what you do when you're depressed, right? You self-isolate. I would have self-isolated, and that only makes things worse. So, get involved to develop character and valuable life skills, because what you're doing is you're building relationships like we talked about, and you're developing confidence and self-esteem, and so those things are. And then embracing self-discovery is the third thing I talk about, and that's taking that uncomfortable step, right? Nobody wants to do it because we're being judged if we go and ask for help, but we need to change the way that we think about failure. But those three things, speaking out, being involved, and embracing self-discovery, that's taking action. And when you take action, you build resilience. So resilience a lot of times is the ability to bounce back. It's talked about the ability to bounce back after some traumatic event. But it's really about growing in the process and learning with each failure, each challenge, each adversity that we face. That adversity that I faced early on in life helped me with later life's challenges. If I wouldn't have had all of the unfortunate adversity early on in life, I don't know if I would have been able to overcome some of these later life's challenges. So, resilience is about growing stronger with each hurdle that we face.
Wow. Yeah, that's really really cool to hear that you can build resilience, because a lot of times I think we hear these stories and then the story already happened, right? So then you're like, oh yeah, that's such a resilient person, you know, but you're talking about maybe not being resilient right now, but doing things in order to grow your resilience. And
That's
that's
right.
it's cool.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the resilience is probably, the seed is within you when you're born, but you have to build your resilience. It's not something that like breathing, it's not natural. So you have to overcome these challenges and learn from each one that you face. And that's the only way to learn. And the only way to get better is to get out there. You can't isolate and hide behind your phone or computer. You have to be involved to make those relationships, to build those relationships.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. Yeah, this explaining to us what resilience means to you and how it's been part of your life to this day. And so, yeah, maybe the listeners have noticed that in a couple months ago, we were running some events in Amsterdam. One of them was called Building Resilience, and it was a storytelling event where people came to tell their stories about resilience, where they saw another person being resilient or themselves. And it was a really beautiful evening with lots of heartful moments. And if you would like to find the spaces to grow, do message us on our channels, and also stay tuned because more of these events are coming up, both online and offline, where we'll talk about topics like resilience. Make sure to join those and stay updated. And Paul has a book coming out about resilience too. So that's really exciting. Links for that are going to be in the show notes, same as with some other social links of Paul that I'm going to post there. And yes, you have a TV series being written about your childhood as well, right?
Yes, the book that you spoke of, which again is, although this says resilience is my superpower, there was a book already written as that. So I had Resilience, My Ultimate Superpower, empowering young adults or young lives to overcome challenges. Yeah, and just one note on that. What I did was developed a Rise and Resilience Challenge. So anybody that is involved in doing these, those things that I talked about, they earn points, and you can use those points to buy promotional items. So that's an incentive for these young adults and anyone to get involved for that matter. And yes, and to on the TV series, yeah, the book is more goes along with my speaking engagements. But the TV series is written about the time that I spent alone. At least the first series will be. It'll be based on a movie. I don't know if anyone has heard of a movie called The Sliding Doors or The Butterfly Effect, which are movies that are based on someone's decision. So what it'll be is it'll be based on my decision to go to football practice or not. And there'll be two vertical paths. That'll be the story for the TV series. That the pilot is being written as we speak.
That's so exciting. I think like there's few people who can say that they have a TV series written on their life. So yeah, that's really cool.
Something I'm looking forward to.
One question that we like to ask all our guests on this podcast, and I would love to ask you as well. What for you does it mean to be a man?
Wow, probably everyone thinks, well, I don't know everyone, but is powerful and strong and, all this, man and play football, whatever. But, to me, a man is somebody that is compassionate, is loving, is taking care of their family, um, is helping others. So my interpretation is more of what you can do when you're a man and how you can help others than being a man, if you will, in that analogy. So I think it's that. I think it's being compassionate. It's being loving. It's caring. It's providing for your family and being there. Being a sounding board for those that need help. So yeah, I look at it differently than how the maybe some or most do when you say, how do you describe a man? I don't know if that makes me sensitive.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's also why we asked this question, because we started this podcast by opening up to each other, and we realized, okay, yeah, that's not really in line with the stereotypical definition of what it means to be manly.
yeah,
So we wanted to redefine what it means to be a man, but we also didn't know what that meant. So we're now really okay with everyone having their own definition of what it means to be a man, because we're all individuals. We all have different qualities. Some are the same, some are different. And for you, this is a completely legit answer. For someone else, they might actually agree with you on half of this, and for the other half,
yeah.
they have their own qualities that
Sure,
they
that's
believe.
right.
You know, in the end of the day, I think if we feel fulfilled with how we see being a man, what we see being a man is, then that's completely fine. And I think that's what we all should strive to have. And this is also no matter if you're a man or a woman. I think we're all part of this. So also for the women out there, I think it's good to have a good definition of the man that you want to have in your life. One thing that you said is also providing for your family. And I recently had a conversation with my girlfriend about exactly this, because we were then thinking, does this mean financial providing? And I disagreed with her, and then she also agreed with me on that. Because like in these days, it's very likely, or like it's possible that if you're in a heterosexual relationship, that your wife or your partner earns more money than you. But then can you still provide for your family? We came to this conclusion that you can provide in so many different ways. You can provide
Yes,
by opening a space, holding space for emotions that are there, like taking care of the home and providing for your family in that way. So I think as a man, providing is definitely a big quality, but there's a lot of ways how you can provide.
that's correct. And you made one point, and you talked about, they may agree with half. Yeah, be half of what I said. And be your authentic self. Be yourself. Be your true self. Don't be anyone else. Be your true self. So yeah, you don't want to take your own authentic self and present that. Yes.
Maybe to round it off and to find what it actually means to be yourself, because I think a lot of people also, if they're in this functioning mode that we mentioned at the start, they might be confused. I don't know what it means to be authentic. I don't know who I am. Well, what you shared before, I think you can find that out by going out there, starting a sport, engaging with others, being in the community. And then automatically, if you put yourself in these kind of spaces, your qualities will come out, because you will find a way to be part of that community.
Absolutely. Very well said, Dennis. Yes, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm loving this interaction, and yeah, beautiful. Well, Paul, is there anything that you would like to wish for our audience in this very moment where they are listening? Yeah, wherever they are, cooking, hanging the laundry, driving.
Yeah.
You listen to podcasts in different places. What's your wish for our audience?
I would say don't waste time. As I said, I froze for 30 years that I wasted. I wasted a portion of my life because of that. So don't waste time, because time is precious. As Einstein said, time is an illusion. All we have is now. What we started talking 40 minutes ago, that time's gone forever. We don't get it back. So don't waste time, because this example, there was a star that exploded 300,000 years ago. Sears 2112, I think it's called. It was exploded 3,000 years ago, and the light for that explosion, that star, would be like our sun just exploding. It took 300,000 years for the light to get here. And light travels at 286, I have it miles, 286,000 miles per second. I don't have the kilometers per second. I'm sorry. Um, but, that's pretty fast. And it took 300,000 years for that light to get here. That's pretty big. And, the human body, we live on an average, at least in the US, about 73 years, about 26,000, 27,000 days we live. And that's not very much. That's not very long. And as you get older, as I am, my days are shortened. So enjoy your time, make it precious. Don't waste time. Don't waste looking for help, because I did. Don't waste that time, because we don't have much. Because as I said, time is an illusion. All we have is right now.
And I would like to end on that note. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here with us today, for becoming part of the Hearts Wide Open community. Yeah, we look forward to read your book, see your TV series in the future. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. Peace to all.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.